May 3, 1945, Torgau, Germany. The rubble dust hung in the air like morning fog, turning sunlight the color of rust. Margaret Fisher knelt in the ruins of what had been her family's bakery, her hands moving through broken bricks with the mechanical patience of someone who had forgotten hope. She weighed 78 pounds. Her fingers, skeletal and trembling, sifted through fragments of mortar searching for grain, any grain that might have survived the firestorm that took everything else. The sound of an engine made her pause. An American Jeep rolled into the square, tires crunching over debris, dust rising behind it like a curtain closing on the past. Before we continue, if you're finding value in these stories of courage and humanity emerging from history's darkest moments, please hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We're building a global community that believes remembering matters. She didn't look up when the Jeep stopped. Liberation had come 2 weeks earlier: chaos in American uniforms, orders in a foreign language. Freedom was just another word for starving without anyone to blame. But then boots appeared in her vision. A voice spoke in English. She looked up. A sergeant stood above her, 30-something, weather-worn face, eyes the color of prairie sky. He held something wrapped in brown paper, and in that moment, watching him unwrap a D-ration chocolate bar, she realized something. The war had ended, but her survival had just begun. The spring of 1945 came to Germany without mercy. In the countryside northeast of Leipzig, the Elbe River flowed past towns that no longer existed. Buildings stood like broken teeth, roads filled with millions of displaced souls, soldiers surrendering, refugees fleeing, survivors searching. The numbers told a story almost too large to comprehend. By war's end, over 11 million Germans had been displaced. Starvation became the new enemy, more ruthless than any army because it killed slowly and without discrimination. Margaret Fisher was 23 years old, though hunger had aged her beyond recognition. Before the war, she'd been a schoolteacher in Torgau, a town of 8,000 souls 40 miles northeast of Leipzig. Her father had run the town bakery for 30 years. Her mother had taught piano lessons in their parlor overlooking the Elbe. Her younger brother Klaus had been conscripted in 1943, sent to Stalingrad, erased from existence somewhere in that frozen hell. By April 1945, Torgau had become a ghost wearing a town's clothes. The bakery had been requisitioned by the Wehrmacht in 1944. Then, Allied bombers painted the sky with fire one February morning. Her father died of a heart attack in the cellar during the raid. Her mother simply stopped eating in March, fading away like a photograph left too long in sunlight. Margaret found herself alone, surrounded by rubble and the constant sound of artillery growing closer. The smell of burning never left the air. Hunger became the baseline reality. The Americans arrived on April 25th. The 69th Infantry Division rolled through streets lined with broken buildings. They'd fought across France, through the Ardennes, across the Rhine. The fighting was brief. The remaining defenders, mostly old men and boys, surrendered within hours. Then came occupation, jeeps, checkpoints, military police registering civilians. The Americans moved with purpose, their voices filling the silence with a language that sounded like machines talking. Margaret hid in the bakery cellar for 3 days. Not from fear of violence, the propaganda about American savagery had revealed itself as lies, but from exhaustion so profound it felt like gravity had doubled. She had nothing left. The cellar walls still smelled of flour and yeast, phantom scents from a lifetime that felt centuries distant. She survived on rainwater and 3 raw potatoes. On the 4th day, she climbed the stairs. Sunlight hit her eyes like a physical blow. The square was unrecognizable. Rubble pushed to the sides, trucks in perfect rows. She stood swaying, her dress hanging like fabric over wire. Her reflection showed a stranger, hollow-eyed, gray-skinned, barely alive. That's when she saw him. Sergeant William James Barker of the 69th Infantry Division. 31 years old, from a farm outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. He'd landed at Utah Beach 11 months earlier and fought his way across Europe. He'd seen towns like this before bombed, burned, emptied, but something about the woman in the square stopped him. She was kneeling in rubble, digging with bare hands, methodically, like someone performing a ritual whose meaning had been forgotten, but whose necessity remained absolute. Her movements were slow, careful, the movements of someone who'd learned that energy was currency more precious than gold. William watched for a full minute before walking over. "What are you looking for?" The words meant nothing to her, but the tone concern, not command, made her pause. She looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, startling in her thin face. She held up a handful of dust and grain mixed together, showed it to him, then let it fall through her fingers. William understood. He'd grown up on a farm during the Depression, watched his mother feed hobos who showed up half-starved. He knew what real hunger looked like. He pulled out a D-ration chocolate bar. Standard issue. 4 ounces of compressed chocolate, oats, and skim milk powder. Soldiers complained it tasted like sweetened dirt. The recipe had been designed to not taste too good. The Army didn't want men eating emergency rations for pleasure. But to someone starving, it was life compressed into brown paper. He held it out. Margaret stared. She hadn't seen real food in weeks. Her hands stayed at her sides. This had to be a trick. Why would a soldier give her food? William understood the hesitation. He knelt beside her, unwrapped the chocolate, broke off a piece, and ate it himself. See? Safe. Then he held out the rest. Her hand moved without conscious thought. She took the chocolate. It felt heavy, substantial, real. The first taste made her eyes close. Sweetness, richness, calories. She forced herself to chew slowly, but her hands shook. William gave her 2 more rations. Then he stood, said something in English, and walked back to his jeep. She watched him go, not quite believing what had happened. That evening, William told his friend Corporal Danny Reeves about her. Danny had survived Normandy and the Bulge. He was cynical, but practical. "You gave her your rations." "She was starving," William said simply. "They're all starving. You can't feed everyone." "I know." But William couldn't stop thinking about her. Something in her eyes. Dignity. She had been someone before the war destroyed her. The next morning he went back. She was there again. Same spot. He brought more rations. This time she didn't hesitate. A local interpreter helped. Through him, William learned her name. Margaret, teacher, family dead, alone. William made a decision that could have gotten him court-martialed. He started bringing Margaret food every day. Real food from the Army mess, bread, eggs, sometimes soup in a thermos. He would find her, sit while she ate, then leave without expecting anything. She began to gain weight slowly. Color returned to her face. But more than physical recovery, something else was happening. She was learning to trust. By the 3rd week of May, she was strong enough to walk. William showed her the supply depot, introduced her to Red Cross workers, made sure she was registered for rations. He did all this without fanfare, without expecting gratitude. One evening, after walking her back to the cellar where she still lived, she spoke in halting English. The interpreter had been teaching her. "Why? Why you help me?" William was quiet. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and shadow. He thought about his mother's kitchen, how she would feed anyone who showed up during the Depression. "Because you needed help," he said finally. For Margaret, who had spent years in a country that valued strength above compassion, that answer was revolutionary. June arrived with unexpected warmth. William's unit received notice they'd be shipping out in 3 weeks. He spent nearly every free hour with Margaret. Their relationship was undefined. Not quite friendship, not quite romance. Something deeper, forged in ruins. She told him about teaching children, about her family, about the slow collapse of everything she'd known. He told her about Oklahoma, about farming wheat under skies so big they made you feel infinite and insignificant, about thunderstorms that rolled across the plains like freight trains. She asked once if he had killed anyone. "Yes," he said. "Are you sorry?" "For stopping the people who did this to you?" He gestured at the ruins. "No, for having to do it." "Yes." She understood. The war had forced everyone into impossible positions. Moral clarity was a luxury neither side could afford. One afternoon in mid-June, William found Margaret at the bakery ruins. She was crying, not sobbing, just tears, as if her body was finally releasing years of held grief. He sat beside her. Didn't speak. After a long time, she said, "I have nothing. When you leave, I will have nothing again." The words hit him hard. He turned to her. "Come with me. When I leave, come with me to America." It was insane. There were regulations, laws, military protocols. Enemy nationals couldn't just immigrate. Fraternization was officially discouraged. Marriage between occupying soldiers and German civilians was complicated at best. But William was serious. "How?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I'll find a way." Over the next week, William investigated every avenue: chaplain, officers, Red Cross officials. The answer was always the same: possible but difficult. Procedures, applications, background checks, months, maybe years, and marriage was required. He proposed on June 20th, 1945, in the bakery ruins. No ring, no elaborate speech. "Margaret, will you marry me and come to Oklahoma?" She said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was arranged through the military chaplain. Chaplain Robert Morrison had performed dozens of such marriages. He understood that love bloomed in strange places during war. The ceremony took place June 27th in a small, undamaged church. Margaret wore a dress provided by Red Cross volunteers. William wore his dress uniform. The witnesses were Corporal Danny Reeves and Herr Schmidt, the interpreter. The chaplain spoke in English, then German, then English again. They signed the papers. Officially married under U.S. military law. Margaret's status changed from enemy national to American soldier's wife. After the ceremony, William took both her hands. His face was serious, intense. "You're mine now." In German, the phrase sounded different, protective rather than possessive. "Du gehörst jetzt zu mir." You belong to me now, not as property but as family, as someone to be cared for, protected, brought home. Margaret understood. They belonged to each other. In a world that had fallen apart, they were building something together. The paperwork began immediately. Margaret was registered as spouse of an American serviceman. Visa application submitted. The wheels of immigration began to turn. In early July, William's unit shipped out. Margaret couldn't go yet. The visa process would take months. The War Brides Act wouldn't even be signed until December 28, 1945. German brides faced particular scrutiny. Between 1947 and 1950, only 14 out of 175 German war brides would be admitted, each application requiring extensive vetting. She would wait in Germany, but this time with papers, with status, with a future. Their last night together, they sat in the square where they'd met. The summer air was warm. Somewhere, someone played an accordion. Rebuilding had progressed. Life was returning slowly but undeniably. "I will send for you," William said, "as soon as the papers clear, as soon as you can travel." "I will wait," Margaret said. Her English had improved dramatically. "I will wait forever if I must." "Promise me you'll eat. Promise me you'll stay strong." "I promise." The morning his unit left, she found him by the convoy assembly point. She wore the same dress from their wedding. They had 90 seconds. William held her face in his hands. "I love you," he said. "Ich liebe dich. I love you." Then he was in the truck. The convoy was moving. She stood on the road, one hand raised, watching him disappear into dust and distance. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had papers. This time, she had hope. Summer became autumn. Autumn became winter. The war in the Pacific ended with atomic fire. Soldiers returned home by the millions. But Margaret remained in Germany, waiting. The visa process was a nightmare. Forms lost, interviews rescheduled, background checks delayed. Her father's membership in business guilds was questioned. Had he supported the Nazi Party? The answer was complicated. Like most Germans, he'd made compromises to survive. Margaret worked for the American Occupation Administration as a translator. She wrote to William every week. His letters came back irregularly. Mail from America was slow. But when his letters arrived, she would read them dozens of times. He described his farm, the wheat fields, the red dirt roads, his mother's kitchen. He sent photographs. She kept them in a tin box under her bed, studying this foreign landscape that was supposed to become home. In February 1946, 9 months after William left, Margaret received the letter. Her visa was approved. Travel arrangements would be made through military channels. Train to Bremerhaven, ship to New York, train to Oklahoma. She cried when she read it, deep, shaking sobs of relief and terror. She was leaving, finally leaving. She visited the bakery one last time the day before she left. Spring was coming early. First flowers pushed through rubble. She knelt where she'd been kneeling the day William found her. Goodbye, Papa. Goodbye, Mama. Goodbye, Klaus. I'm going to America now. I'm going to live. March 1946. The ship crossed the Atlantic in 12 days. New York Harbor appeared through morning fog. The Statue of Liberty rose like a promise. Ellis Island processed her with bureaucratic efficiency. Mrs. William Barker, permanent resident, bound for Oklahoma. The train from New York to Tulsa took 3 days. She watched America scroll past. Everything was big. The sky stretched wider than any sky in Germany. There was no rubble, no ruins. William met her at the Tulsa train station on March 15, 1946, 10 months since they'd said goodbye. He looked different civilian clothes, thinner, older, but when he saw her, his face broke into a smile that made him look 20 years old. They stood on the platform for a long moment. Then he crossed the space and pulled her into his arms. "You made it," he whispered. "You actually made it." I promised I would stay strong. The drive to the farm took an hour. Dirt roads the color of rust. Fields of winter wheat just starting to green. The sky was enormous. Margaret had never seen so much open space. The farmhouse looked exactly like the photographs. William's mother, Sarah Barker, was waiting on the porch. She looked at Margaret with practical assessment, then smiled. "Welcome home," Sarah said. Home. The word felt foreign and perfect. The years that followed weren't easy. Margaret struggled with language, culture, suspicion. Anti-German sentiment remained strong. Some neighbors were hostile. But Sarah became her ally, teaching her to cook Southern food, to speak with an Oklahoma accent that would hide her German origins. By summer 1946, Margaret was pregnant. James Friedrich Barker was born in February 1947 during an ice storm. The roads were impassable. Sarah delivered the baby with Margaret screaming in German and Sarah calmly instructing in English. When William held his son, something clicked into place. This was his family. This was what the war had been for. 3 more children followed. Elizabeth in 1949, Thomas in 1952, Sarah in 1955. The farmhouse filled with noise and life. Margaret taught her children German, but they spoke English. They were American. On quiet evenings, Margaret would sit on the porch and think about Torgau, about the square where she'd knelt in rubble, about the girl she'd been and the man who'd given her chocolate. William would find her there sometimes. "You okay?" "I am remembering," Good memories or bad? Both. William Barker died in 1989 at age 75. Margaret lived another 16 years. She died in the spring of 2005, age 83, in the same farmhouse they had built together, surrounded by fields that rolled golden in the summer and turned to stubble in the fall. She died quietly, as the wheat was just beginning to green after winter, when the air smelled faintly of rain and new beginnings. Her obituary was short and simple. It mentioned her children, her grandchildren, her faith, and her pies. It didn't mention that she was German. It didn't mention the war. It didn't say that she had once been a girl in a city of ruins, scavenging for bread among broken bricks. It didn't mention the night she met an American soldier with tired eyes and a ration of chocolate in his hand. It didn't mention that 3 quiet words, "You're mine now," had changed everything. But her children knew. Her grandchildren knew. They had heard the story, pieced together from whispers over kitchen tables and letters in a tin box. And they told it again at her funeral, beneath the same Oklahoma sky where she and William had built their life. It was a small story in the vast history of the war. Millions died. Millions suffered. Entire nations fell and rose again. Yet, in the midst of destruction and fear, 2 people from opposite sides chose mercy over vengeance, love over hate.